what? Amanda Parris is going on mat leave? Like, how could you have a baby now? Like, what the, like what kind of timing is this? Like, you're gonna bring a baby into the pandemic and right when CBC is all about retaining the what black talent it has, off you fucking go. What's going on? Like,
I'm not quitting. I'm not
I know
leaving.
you're not quitting, but
For the past 5 years, we have traveled from coast to coast to coast. We have been able to introduce you to more than 700 artists, the innovators, the creators, and the dreamers of Canada. We've put the spotlight on legends in the game and emerging talent trying to make their name. We've told the stories of those at the peak of their career and others just trying to survive through the things they've held dear. And now, 130 episodes later, it's time to say goodbye. Peace.
let me just, say on camera, congratulations, mama. This is like, I've been so excited kind of and just in awe watching you kind of develop and grow as an artist, as a journalist in this industry. And, I've always been excited about the next thing you're going to do. This is not what I expected for Amanda Parris's next step. That's not what I was had in mind, but, I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Thank you.
Um, then let's talk about, like, we're talking about, we're here because the final season of The Exhibitionist. You're about to go and off and become a mom, and you decide this is the year that you're going to wrap up this show. But let's go back to the beginning of it, because I mean, first of all, with The Exhibition, it's an interesting thing because in my work, I'm always like, I'm interviewing new artists and talents and stuff, and you always take that pride. It's like, oh, I'm gonna like, this is someone new and exciting. You take some pride in helping discover them, and then I found out that you fucking discovered them first because they were already on The Exhibition, like someone like Etsy Mensa or something like that, right? So I mean, pivotal show, but talk to me about the origins of it.
Well, CBC Arts Exhibitionist started before I got there in the terms of concept and the whole rollout of it. A bunch of folks at the CBC kind of realized, there's no national show that is covering arts and artists across Canada. There's no television show that's doing that particular work, and so maybe this is a gap that, as the public broadcaster, we need to fulfill. And so that group of people included Carolyn Hugh, who went on to become the executive producer of CBC Arts and was my first boss in the building, and she's amazing. And her vision and the vision of everyone in that group was to make this an incredibly diverse show that wouldn't just focus on sort of like the established, already known names of the Canadian arts industries, but would create a space for intergenerational recognition, for emerging artists, mid-career artists, established artists, artists across all mediums throughout all regions of Canada, and that we would create space to tell their stories in whatever moment they were in at that time. And so, in terms of, like, for me, it was my first ever television show, my first ever time hosting anything that's recorded. I'd only done some like live community arts events. So I had to learn. This is the show where I learned all of my skills. This is the show where I learned from the very basic, how do you walk and talk while a camera is on you and you're looking into that camera, which sounds simple, but isn't that simple.
Oh, I'm still learning it.
Yeah.
Or I don't think I have yet. I'm still getting there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a skill
Yeah.
to more elaborate things in terms of like writing scripts, prepping for interviews, everything from, and then now I produce segments, so I came on just very, very raw, not very good. You watch that first episode and it's like, oh, why did they keep this woman? But they did, and they invested in me. They got me trainers. They had patience with me, allowed me to grow, allowed me the space and the time, because it was a kind of a smaller show. It's a weekly show. It's about arts. It's not necessarily going to be a huge ratings bonanza. I was given that kind of grace period that not a lot of people get, and definitely not a lot of Black women get. So I'm forever grateful to the show, not only for allowing me to like meet all these incredible people and to tell all these stories, but also for me to develop a whole new career, and to do so with the space to grow and to become somebody who is now much more confident in their craft.
Have you seen anyone else get that opportunity in your time there? Like, because it's like, I mean, this is an important conversation I think to have when we're coming through the summer of George Floyd and stuff, right? And so we're all having this kind of reckoning and looking in our own kind of office spaces and looking at our own colleagues and looking at the people we work with and all the other departments. Have you seen that kind of that trust and that empowerment happen anywhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've created multiple opportunities within our little CBC Arts department. We hire so many freelance filmmakers. We've hired over 100 freelance filmmakers to make films throughout our time period. A lot of those freelance filmmakers have gone on to have future relationships and more developed relationships and create things in the CBC overall. But in terms of your question on a larger scale for the whole building, I don't think that my experience has become a working example that has shaped the rest of the building. Like, I don't see it as making systemic change. It's kind of an outlier, and it kind of sucks because when the young people ask me, how do you get there, how did you do this, what was your journey, I'm like, this isn't really a model that you can follow. This isn't something that I can say this is an example that you can take forward with you. It's an example for managers that, like, that they should take forward, but for people who are trying to come up, it's not a model you can replicate very easily. So I wouldn't say that it's something that I've observed in exactly the same way on a large scale at all.
Here's the thing. Like, I mean, and I guess my big point is, like, when they go out on a limb, when they say we're gonna kind of bring in these diverse talents and stuff, and then you got someone like you that then becomes kind of almost the face. You are the face of CBC Arts. I can't think of anyone else who's the face of CBC Arts. Yeah, right. So not only are you the face of CBC Arts, but you are also the face of Black for CBC. Because I don't know anyone else, like, who besides Matt Galloway, who has a big ass poster in the damn building.
Right,
Huh?
Drummond
Dwight
has a
Drummond.
big.
Okay, fine. Okay, Dwight Drummond. So, like, Dwight Drummond, Matt Galloway, Amanda Parris. These are the ones who have these big posters in that building, right? So, I mean, like, take a minute now. Or take a second to acknowledge kind of the position you hold there, the, like, how much you mean in that building. And now we go through this summer, this summer of reckoning, and you hear all these horror stories and stuff. What was that like for you? Now, witnessing these stories come out, witnessing these stories pour out about, like, kind of like the heartache for Black journalists in the building, for the what people see, for the way some of the conversations were handled in that building, while also being at home in the pandemic, and also, unbeknownst to all of us, growing a baby.
Yeah. Um, it was a very overwhelming first few periods of the lockdown. It was reading all of the things, attending all of the virtual meetings, writing numerous emails of my own, attempting to advocate for different staff, different stories, different ways of sharing content in departments that I don't belong to. Um, and doing all of that while puking because I was in my first trimester and, like, taking naps and, like, just being like, oh, I'm so tired and sick and nobody knows. No one knows my drama.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and then also just going through all the emotions and all the grief and the trauma of that period was so much. It was overwhelming. I will say though that it wasn't necessarily revelatory to hear a lot of those testimonies because CBC had created a space, or staff at CBC had created a space a few years back called CBC Diversify, where all the Black, Indigenous, and people of color staff of CBC were welcome to come into this space and utilize it as an advocacy body. And so a lot of those meetings that I had attended, I'd heard so many versions of those stories already come up. I'd seen how so many people, so many really talented people were leaving as a result of not wanting to deal with the realities that they were facing every single day in some of those spaces. And a lot, like, I think I recognized that I was working and I knew this for a while, that I've been in a little bubble in my little CBC Arts and CBC Music team. Like, I've been in a bit of not to say that there aren't issues that pop up every now and again, but it's very different from those folks that are doing news on the daily and the things that come up in that environment and in that work, that pace of work and that way of working, that I just haven't had to deal with. And so, I was trying to recognize, like, what is my role here as someone who's not working directly in those departments, but maybe that's a point of privilege. And so I tried to utilize my voice as much as possible as somebody who doesn't work in news and has no desire to work in news, no goals to work in news, to be like, hey, I'm going to say some stuff that maybe some of your employees feel a little bit too intimidated to say. But that was just like internal corporation work. In terms of the external stuff, trying to utilize my column as much as possible to write about things or stories and angles that I didn't see getting covered in other places and spaces. And then, as always, just trying to get as many of us in the door as possible for whatever opportunities, always.